Welcome to Caesarea Philippi. This is the place where Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And I thought it would be interesting if we just relive that in the Scripture. So we're at Matthew 16 and verse 13. It says in verse 13, Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi. That's where we are, right here. Now, there were two Caesareas, if you haven't realized that on a trip already. One is Caesarea Maritime, down by the sea. This is Caesarea Philippi, up north. There is no record that Jesus ever went any further north than this spot right here. And there is an interesting dynamic to consider in that regard, because this was a pagan city. It was a pagan city. I want to emphasize the word pagan. You're going to see the ruins of pagan temples and so forth and so on when we release you for pictures here in a moment. There's a big cave right over here. Many believed in tradition that was the entrance to hell. And so why did Jesus travel with his disciples all the way up here, and they sit down to have this discussion? Matthew 16, verse 13, he asked his disciples, saying, I want you to get the electricity of this. Everything oozes paganism here. First of all, it's hard to get here. I mean, we rode in a nice bus up here, and it took quite a while. The disciples are on foot, and they walked up here, and he says to them, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And I can picture them. They're staring at each other. They're looking at each other like deer in the headlights. Wonder what he's up to. Wonder what's this question about. Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And some said, well, we think you're John the Baptist. I can hear indecision in their voices. We don't know. Some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, others Jeremiah, or maybe you're one of the prophets. Just put a little pause there and let that sink in. It's not quite evident who he is to these guys. And all of a sudden, verse 16, Simon Peter answers and he says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Where'd Peter get a hold of that? Jesus answered the question. He said to Peter, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. A divine revelation has just taken place. Again, I ask you the question, why does Jesus bring his disciples to a pagan city like this for a divine revelation? I have said this over and over and over again in my ministry. There are things hidden like this that if you will just consider, these are testimonials that the Bible has to be originated from God. If we had written this story, we would have taken the 12 disciples to the greatest religious center in the country. We would have had all the Dr. Wonderfuls assembled, and we would have had a great conference, and we would have had the declaration in front of everybody. All the cameras would have been on and all that kind of stuff. Jesus, on the other hand, flipped that over, brings his disciples to a pagan city where nobody's interested up here in who he is, who his disciples are. Very unlikely place to announce, this is the Son of God. Wow. Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. Flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father that's in heaven. And I say to you, he says, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Now, I'm not a great Greek scholar, but I know that the Greek has to be in agreement with the statement, if Peter is going to be the rock on what the church is built on, the Greek does not agree in gender. The Greek here is indifferently, it says, you are Peter, and upon the rock of the confession, I will build my church. It's not building on Peter. So I don't want to get theologically Greek with you for a moment. You can do that on your own later. But the Greek does not agree that Peter was going to be the subject of the sentence. You are Peter, and upon the rock of the confession, I will build my church. And he says this, the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Now, we got another reason why Jesus is here. Because the pagans called that the gate of Hades. They believed they could make human sacrifice or animal sacrifice up here, and the blood would run over. There was a spring in there. If it would run red, and the river right here would run red, then the God would have rejected the sacrifice. If it would run clean after the sacrifice, he accepted. So they had all this paganism going on, ridiculous, matter of fact, because you slaughter an animal and put it in the water, it's going to run red, right? And so all of that was going on here. By the way, just for a pause, the Jordan River starts here under that mountain, and it was part of all that pagan practice. This is where the Jordan River begins. To continue in the scripture, the gates of Hades will not prevail against it, and I will give you the keys of the kingdom, or kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. What's that about? It is about divine revelation. We started the verse with divine revelation. If God divinely reveals something, it's bound in heaven. And if God reveals something else, it's bound on earth. But the binding begins with the revelation from God. It doesn't mean that we can be in a bad mood and just all of a sudden say, okay, God, dry all the rain up, or what. That's not what's talking about here at all. It's talking about the revelation of God. And so, you have traveled 7,000 miles, and here we are at the place where Jesus was declared the Son of God for the first time. We have been declaring that for 2,000 years. I believe with all of my heart, there's no question in my mind, Jesus is the Son of God. And I belong to Him. I started that in January 1974, and I'm on a journey. It will be completed when I see Him face to face. Then I'll rule and reign with Him down here in Jerusalem. And He is the Son of God, and I am His disciple, and I feel honored to be here and to come to the spot. And now, if you'll allow me to, I will join Peter, and I will say, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And that is settled in my spirit. It will never be visited in form of a question again. Welcome to Caesarea Philippi.